Hi, my name is Chris, and today we're going to be making a spaceship-themed cold drip coffee tower. The parts of the tower that are involved in making the cold drip coffee include, at the top, a 64-ounce glass jar which holds the ice water, which has a pressure-compensating irrigation drip emitter that drips water into the glass bottle that holds the coffee grounds, and sits on top of a stainless steel funnel that helps direct the resulting coffee into the glass jar below, which has an optional spigot that you can use to pour the coffee out with. The basic structure of the cold drip coffee tower is made up of the 3 supports that hold the tower up, which are each made of 3 segments, and are held together at the joints by the connectors. The other major pieces are the 2 platforms, and also a smaller assembly that supports the glass bottle. I've already created the template needed to laser cut the parts, so the first step is to download the files and laser cut the pieces for the coffee tower. The design uses about 1.5 18 by 24 inch sheets of 1/8 inch plywood. I try to make sure that the largest pieces are about a foot long, so even smaller laser cutters can cut all of the pieces. Plywood is made of glue-in sheets of wood perpendicular to each other, but because 1/8 inch plywood is so thin, mine and likely yours are only 3 sheets thick. Because it is an odd number, this means that one direction is going to be much more rigid than the other, and because this design is close to the limits of what 1/8 inch plywood can support, you want to make sure that the rigid side is in line with the height of the tower. I forgot about this when I first cut the pieces, and cut some of them perpendicular to the rigid section, and as you can see, it makes a big difference in the bending of the piece. The next step in the process is sanding, then staining and applying finish to the wood. This part is optional, however I definitely think it improves the look, and it's a good idea to add a water resistance coating to the tower, because the glass jar on the top that holds the ice water is going to cause condensation and expose wood near it to moisture. When I apply stain and surface finishes to laser cut pieces that I will be gluing together, I like to stain the wood, then glue the pieces together, and finally apply the finish to the wood. I stain before gluing because leftover glue can prevent the wood from absorbing stain. And I apply the finish after gluing together the pieces because any finish that dries in the joints that connect the pieces can make it harder to insert the pieces correctly. Now for the gluing, the bottom 2 segments have 3 joints where 3 connectors are inserted to help keep the segments together. Furthermore, the piece that goes in the front joint has its own slots for 2 more pieces that will be glued to the sides to help increase the surface area that the platforms have to sit on. For this process, I use quick drying superglue and wood glue. To start, the 2 pieces that go on the side were superglued to the frontmost connector, and then I applied wood glue to the inside portions of the 2 side pieces. Next, I added wood glue to each of the slots on one side of the connectors, and then fit the 3 connectors into the joints. Then I repeated this on the other half of the slots and slid the 2 segments together. I found that using a toothpick was an easy method to insert the glue without being too messy, but it does still involve some wiping off of glue. Then you go through the same basic process for joining the top 2 segments, but this one only has 2 joints. Also take note that joining the top 2 segments uses a smaller front connector and side pieces. With that done, I noticed that the side pieces didn't quite sit flat with the segments. So I added a little super glue to the end of the pieces, and then clamped them together for a short amount of time to make sure that they are flat to the surface. And then this entire process needs to be done 3 times for all of the support pieces. With that done, the only other assembly that needs to be glued together is the circular piece that holds up the glass bottle that contains the coffee grounds. The last part that needs to be done to the wood structure is applying the wood finish. I used a polyacrylic finish and also applied 3 coats. The other parts that need to be modified are the glass containers. I didn't find any glass containers that had holes cut in the correct areas and were reasonably economic, so I opted to make my own. This was both cheaper and made sure that I could suit the containers more exactly to my needs. I did my best to make the design as interchangeable as possible, so that you don't have to use the exact same parts as me. The easiest method I found to cut specific size holes into glass is using diamond-coated drill bits. You can get sets of them on Amazon or eBay for probably around $12. I used 2 sized drill bits when cutting. The smallest I use for the hole that the drip emitter will go through, and the hole that goes on the bottom of the bottle that holds the coffee grounds. The larger I use for the optional spigot that you can put on the bottom of the glass jar. I then laser cut 2 holes that were the size of the 2 drill bits and will help guide the drill bits when starting the drilling. When you're cutting into the glass, using lubrication will help extend the life of the drill bit. And a nice trick that I found to help automatically provide this is to poke a small hole into a soda bottle and then unscrew the cap. To do the cutting, I marked the rough center in Sharpie, then taped the holes over the center mark, started the water, and cut through the glass. The basic process for cutting is to put very little weight onto the drill and rotate the drill slightly during cutting. I then cut the same hole for the glass bottle and the larger side hole for the bottom jar. After cutting, I made sure that the spigot fit and can hold water without leaking, and then glued on the drip emitter to the top jar using a food-safe silicone glue. The joints on each of the platforms are made so that they pop onto the side. It ended up a bit crude, but this helps make sure that the platforms won't slide off from the vertical pieces without making the joint permanent. That way the tower can be disassembled if you ever want to store or move it. The basic process for assembling the tower is to snap on both of the platforms on one of the tower segments, and then carefully snap on the other 2 segments to the platforms. After I assembled the tower, I wasn't quite happy with how much it wobbled. My main concern was that the bottom of the columns would slide out from under the tower and cause the segments to buckle. So I laser cut some feet to add to the vertical supports to make sure that the vertical segments wouldn't slide and buckle. And after adding the feet, I was much happier with the results. I won't speak much about cold drip coffee recipes because I'm still pretty new to this myself, but a general recipe I found online used a water to coffee ratio of about 11:1. After filling up the glass bottle with about 6 ounces of coffee grounds, I put the bottom glass jar in place, then added the funnel and cut up a coffee filter to place under the hole in the glass bottle so that the coffee grounds wouldn't drip into the bottom jar. I then added the glass bottle to the tower and poured some water into the coffee grounds to moisten it. To add the top jar, I filled it partway up with water and used my finger to plug the drip emitter on the bottom while I carried it to the tower. Not that it will leak much. and once on, I filled it up the rest of the way with ice. And that's the basic process for making the coffee. Now we wait. I found that this drip tower takes a while, because the drip emitter slows down gradually as the water level decreases. For my first couple runs, it took a little longer than 12 hours to completely drain all of the water. I used the slowest drip emitter I could find for this, which was rated at a ½ gallon per hour. If you want to speed up the process, you could get a faster dripper. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.